Our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Tyler. I've always been a big fan of Edge, so with WrestleMania coming up and the storyline tracking towards him winning the WWE title to cap his comeback, I look back on his career since becoming a main eventer. The guy has 11 world title reigns, and not a single one of them is a signature clean world title win. All of them are either gimmick matches and or featuring interference. Do you think this diminishes Edge in any way, or because he was a heel for almost all of those wins, does it make it okay? He's won more titles than anyone. That is what it says. He's won more titles than anyone, but it feels like the one thing Edge is missing from his career is that one clean world title win. And Jim, I don't know if you've noticed, but you didn't watch that main event for Fastlane that I told you was great.
Yeah.
Coming out of that match, Vince McMahon apparently made the decision that WrestleMania's main event has switched from Edge versus Roman Reigns to Edge versus Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan.
So if Edge wins, he'll still get screwed up in a fucking mixture of. But here's the in response to the question: if they did a package and went back and said, "Hey, fans, look at every time that Edge has won a championship, here's what happened," and just showed him constantly lucking into it, being a heel and screwing somebody, getting it in some quirky fashion, and not actually beating anybody, then yeah, it would hurt him. But right now, the only people, and I say this with all due respect to the questioner, he is correct in his assumption that it's been a shitty way to put any kind of titles on anybody, and that's why nobody remembers when Edge won the big one, because he never actually won the big one. It was a bunch of little ones. But nobody now that matters, except the people that are already watching anyway, the dedicated people like this questioner that knew that off the top of their head, nobody's going to fucking remember it. Nobody's going to know it. Edge has been off TV for several years because he had to retire because of a premature career-ending injury, and everybody was upset as he was because they liked Edge. And now he's back, and they're willing to. He's got goodwill, and they're not thinking in that term. Now, is the reason why that Edge was never, with all of his talent, and I love Edge, and I'm not knocking him, but is there a reason why he was never on the level of a top guy like an Austin or a Rock or a Taker or whatever? Because he, instead of ever winning a big one, he had all those shitty little pissy wins, whether he was a heel or not. Possibly. Now you might be onto something. Because doing bad finishes or finishes that don't really get a guy over, or the more storyline finish stuff that the modern writers think is what the bookers used to do disputed finishes to lead to rematches, even though it's totally unlike it because you're fucking people constantly. Anyway, it doesn't hurt now because the fans ain't going to remember, as I said, unless you went back and showed it to them, and then they'd go, "Oh yeah, you're right." But right now they're glad to see him back. But is the reason why that he was not the tippy top guy before he had to retire because they did a bunch of shitty finishes with him? Possibly. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. The subject line in the email was Edge's legacy. What do you think his legacy is?
Well, I mean, I don't want to fucking, give the eulogy on this poor guy. I think he was a great talent. He got over at a time when people were still thankfully watching the business. I think that, the TLC matches I could have done without, but I was a fan of his as a worker since first time I saw him when he was Adam Copeland having the tryout match with Christian. And I've said that. He's a great worker. He's a different looking guy. He was a good looking athlete. I loved the Brood shit. I loved his trench coat. I loved his long rock star hair. He could fucking go and he could talk. He was a top guy, but I think he actually could have been more of a top singles guy, which is what I would have done from the time I first saw him. I thought this guy is a modern looking Ric Flair type, pretty boy, chicken shit, heel, I don't even say chicken shit, but he could take the bumps and he could beg off, and then he could be on offense and he could be vicious, and he had facial expressions and he could work and he had the body. I was sold on the first time I saw him to use him as a top heel and figure in 3 to 5 years, this guy's going to be one of the top single heels in the company. And that's what I would have done had it been me. But the Brood was good and everything, like the vampires were hot at that point. So that was fine, but I would have done more with him as a single and pointed him in that direction as a start.